Much I marveled this ungainly fowl, to smell his stench so plainly, his ghostly slick and greasy scalp, shining from his open pores, snorts the neckbeard, "Nevermore!" Hello friends, and welcome back to ReddX, your source for the freshest daily Reddit content. Anywhere on the internet, promise, swearsies it's just a fact, and it's totally science. Go ahead and look it up. Today we are jumping into r/Tales of Neckbeards. Yes indeed, I thought about doing something different, we're about due for a praying mantis or a crackhead Craigslist, but I just gotta get the beards out of my system before we can turn back to nice guys and all that other stuff that we like to do on the channel. So both of these stories are from authors who have written for the channel before. We've got user Red, who wrote about the taxi driver Neckbeard. We're getting a part 2 of that. Part 1 is in the description if you'd like to check that out. And then user Caustic Fox is back again with the Slendybeard stories, as I have dubbed him. We've done 2 of those so far, so we're jumping into part 3, and it is nice and beefy, so hopefully you guys will enjoy it. We'll get some plugs and disclaimers out of the way, and then we will jump right into this Neckbeard cringe. Taxi Driver Neckbeard, Part 2. Warren learned something new. I'm back with Part 2 of the Taxi Driver Neckbeard saga. If you missed Part 1, here's a quick recap. I'm a 30-year-old disabled female in a wheelchair, and Warren, the neckbeard of the story, got a job at the disabled taxi company in my town when I was in my mid-20s. What could be better than a neckbeard entrusted to transport the most vulnerable around town? Sounds like a disaster in the making. He's in his early 40s, average height and weight, slightly balding up top, and somehow has no neck to connect his chin and shoulders together. He had a way of talking that made me momentarily wish my eardrums would burst for just a moment of reprieve from his wisdomless yammering. And, of course, let's not forget about the smell. In my last post, I described his waftiness as a mix between shoe polish and rotten cheese. But my next encounter with this pungent man was, although slightly more agreeable to my sinuses, still unpleasant to say the least. Much I marveled this ungainly fowl, to smell his stench so plainly, his ghostly slick and greasy scalp, shining from his open pores, snorts the neckbeard, "Nevermore!" Oh, I love that. Neckbeard parody, I can't get enough. My second interaction with Warren was when I first came to truly understand his lack of social cues, as he didn't seem to grasp the fact that he was taking me to the emergency room at the hospital. I was in a lot of pain, of which would later be discovered was caused by bladder stones, so I was in no mood for idle chit-chat, especially with someone as utterly repugnant as Warren. During the drive to the hospital, he kept trying to start up a conversation with me, but didn't seem to pick up on my not-so-subtle grunts or half-word mumbles that I was giving him in response to his endless barrage of questions. When dropping me off at the hospital, he seemed to think that his one-way conversation with me was still going. As he asked, as casually as if he dropped me off at the grocery store, what I was planning for the rest of my day. Probably laying in a fucking hospital bed, you mouth breather. The pain I was feeling was so intense that I didn't bother with politeness and just left to go inside without giving him an answer. 4 hours later, after being poked and prodded and dosed with the strongest painkillers I could get, I was finally ready to go home. And guess who it was that picked me up? Yep, you got it. As I saw Warren approaching the entrance to the emergency room in the taxi cab, my gut hit the floor. The only saving grace was the exceptionally strong painkillers I was on, which made me give slightly less fucks than usual. Warren said as he got out of the car to greet me in a poorly done attempt at acting casual. "Oh, hey again. How's your day been?" OP, you dropped me off at the emergency room 4 hours ago. How do you think my fucking day has been? Warren, not opening the back door to the cab to attach me and my wheelchair in place.
What's wrong?
OP, furious and just wanting to go home. I don't want to talk. I just want to get home. Now! Warren proceeded to open the back door and attach me and my wheelchair in place, all the while trying to start up a conversation with me. I marveled at his way of having a conversation when the other person, i.e. me, would not respond. So for the next 20 minutes, I got the displeasure of hearing all about his day.
I can't wait till I finish work. I'm gonna play my new video game. Do you like video games? It's such a nice day outside. It's a pity you were inside.
Not really by choice.
I took this lady to the movies. Do you like movies? What's your favorite movie? Hey, what's your favorite coffee? Do you like coffee? I prefer decaf, but flat whites are pretty good too.
And then the straw that broke the camel's back and finally made me snap at him.
I got sushi for lunch and learned how to use chopsticks. Do you know how to use chopsticks?
OP, what? I'm a fucking quadriplegic. No, I can't use chopsticks. That's good. And I don't bloody care. I've been at the emergency room for 4 fucking hours. I don't bloody care. Will you just please take me home? Here's where you think he would get the message and finally shut his gab, but I was not that lucky. He kept asking questions and telling me innocuous things. By the time I got home, I was furious and immediately called the taxi company to issue a complaint about him. It would have been fine if he had just managed to shut up. I wish that this was the last tale that I had to tell about Warren, but sadly I have many, many more. It's clear that you sadists... Whoa! You sadists like hearing about my misery, so I'll be sure to continue posting about him. Thanks for reading. Am I really a sadist? I thought that it was more about like making myself cringe, which would make me more of a masochist, wouldn't it? I'm not here to watch the OPs suffer. I'm here to make myself suffer, at least a little bit. This is my penance. I honestly do enjoy spreading the word about neckbeards and, you know, letting people know that there are people like this out there and that you need to be extremely wary of them. But a big part of it is also just the delicious cringe. I can't seem to get enough. And that interaction about the chopsticks was just mwah, so beautiful. Oh, give me some good belly laughs, man. This dude is like so disconnected from reality. I guarantee you he actually didn't eat any sushi that day. This is just like one of those conversation points that he jumps to when people don't seem to want to talk to him. I think maybe he might be just one of those nervous people that when he gets nervous, he can't shut up. Or he might legitimately be like just a socially unaware creep. Either way, I am extremely hungry for more. You might see Clover Rose down in the comments, and she is the author of these stories. You should go subscribe to her channel. She's got a pretty big channel going, and I definitely appreciate you providing some content/cringe for my channel as well. So, with that said, friends, we shall move into Caustic Fox's story, the big beefy one about Slendybeard and Caustic Fox's mom. Please leave my mother and my sister alone. Hi again. I'm glad my last post about D, i.e. Slendybeard, was so well received. And while I wasn't sure whether or not I was going to continue this, here we are. I imagine this will amuse/infuriate some people, and that's kind of the point behind Neckbeard stories, isn't it? So, have fun. Yes, fun. Warning! Attempted sexual coercion of someone who's been assaulted before, fear of losing a loved one, lots of cringe, a high possibility of impotent rage, as a certain YouTuber likes to say. That's me. My cringy writing style, And if I forgot any other warnings, then my apologies. This time, dear readers, our story is actually split into two. Ooh, that's value for money. One beginning after Slendybeard and I had already been split up for a few weeks, and the other sometime in the middle of his bullshit need to get into my pants. That one, however, doesn't actually star me. So with that in mind, a new character appears. Meet N, my younger adopted sister and best friend of nearly a decade. She's smart, she's cute, she's small, and she must be protected at all costs. I'm not kidding. I will smack a bitch, and I've proven this, if someone messes with this chick. This includes sweaty beanpole neckbeards who don't know what the word no means. Part 1. My mom won't take shit from a neckbeard. Sometime around maybe 3 weeks after Slendybeard broke up with me, my aunt wound up in the hospital due to skin cancer. Don't use tanning beds, kids. They are just not worth it. It was bad enough that they were going to have to remove a layer of skin off of her back, and she was obviously feeling pretty crappy. My mom and I had gone to sit with her while her husband went to work so that she wouldn't be alone, as she had the same kind of GAD as I do and wasn't handling the situation very well. My mother was, of course, very worried. This was her little sister, and she loved her a lot. Cancer runs in my family, in many forms, unfortunately, and we had lost my grandma to lung cancer only a few years prior. The doctor had assured us that my aunt would be fine during and after the procedure, and that this wasn't an incredibly bad case, but my mom heard the word cancer and sort of quietly panicked. The wounds from grandma were still fresh, and mom didn't want to lose her sister too. Our second day of sitting in for my uncle started off pretty normally. I sat in the corner with my laptop out, quietly playing Skyrim, I think. Mom was in the chair beside the hospital bed, reading something on Facebook, and my aunt was passed out. I had an earbud in to hear what was going on in-game, but the other one was out so I could hear my mom if she needed me. It had been relatively quiet in the room for a couple of hours when my mother's phone started to ping, letting her know that she had received a text message. It wasn't just one, though. Her phone began to sound possessed, as she received several messages in the span of just a few seconds. This alone was enough to get me to turn and look at her, since the only ones I knew who shotgun texts a few sentences at a time were myself and my sister. Mom read quietly for a few moments, and then her face wiped itself of emotion. Both she and I have very expressive faces. We're open books in most situations, but I didn't have a clue what she was feeling in that moment. She almost seemed to turn to stone, before slowly beginning to melt in what could only be rage. Watch out for the mom rage. Here it comes. At this point in time, I'd finally told my mother a soft version of what had happened with Slendybeard during the months that we had dated. She and I were very close, and of course she realized something was up, because apparently I had been acting pretty abnormally. One day she kind of cornered me and demanded that I spill the truth, so I did. I left out some of the grittier details, of course, but she had more than a vague idea of what had actually gone down. As I had assumed, she was not happy. As to be expected. It had taken a lot for me to convince her not to go after that slimy little shitface, but she was still very upset about it. I'm not gonna go into super detail here because it's really not my place, but my mother had grown up in an abusive family where someone she loved and trusted had sexually assaulted her and gotten away with it. Jesus. It messed her up pretty bad mentally, and she'd spent the majority of her life trying to get to a point where she was okay about things. The idea that her daughter had gone through anything similar, though I don't claim to have had things nearly as bad as she did because she's been through a lot. But that thought alone devastated her. This was especially hard on her because, well, when Dee and I dated, Mom and he were sort of tentative friends. She'd always thought something was pretty off with him, but they had some hobbies in common. They both liked science and computers. My mom worked for IBM for a while and knew a lot about them. She's actually where I've gotten a lot of my love for computers from. And many a time when I came home from school, I would find that Slendybeard already biked over so he could help her in the garden and talk shop while they worked. She felt like she should have seen this coming, and I really think she blamed herself for it for a long time, despite my insistence that it was not her fault. After a few moments of watching my mother nearly hulk out and crush her phone, or something, I asked her what was wrong. There weren't many things I could think of that would cause such a reaction from her, and what she read to me was not something that I expected. Apparently, the one shotgunning text to her was D. After we'd broken up, communication with him had all but ceased to exist with my mom, thankfully, so this was the first time that she'd heard from him in quite a while. He hadn't broken the silence simply to catch up with her, though. No, D had a very specific reason for contacting her. D had had a wet dream about my mother. Paging Dr. Freud, he then decided it was a good idea to describe it to her in explicit detail. Oh my God. That is so far from a good idea. This is possibly the worst idea that has ever been had. Like, what are you doing, dude? Yes, friends, you read that right. D had sent my mother several paragraphs of a nearly pornographic, trashy romance-styled fantasy that he had had about her. My married, loyal mother. The one who wanted him dead a few weeks ago due to what he'd done to her daughter. Not only that, but the last message was him actually asking her
if she'd like to give reenacting this fantasy with him a go.
Oh, how did you convince yourself that the answer could possibly be yes? What a maroon. Now, I'd like to clarify something here. D knew where we were right then and what had been going on. I was absent from school for a few days to be there with my mom through all of this, and our school was small enough that any kind of newsworthy gossip tended to spread pretty fast. Mostly, everyone already knew what had happened to my aunt within the first day of me being gone, at least according to a few of my friends. And yet, somehow, D thought that this was an appropriate time to channel his inner Brindle Chase and proposition my already stressed out mother. I mean, stress can make people do crazy things, but I don't think stress is ever this bad. I don't know what my mom said to D to get him to leave her alone. She has a tongue that cuts like a knife, so I know it was bad, but she refused to let me read it. D, however, never contacted her again, and from what his sister Lou told me, it apparently scared the living shit out of him. Good. Oh, God. Sometimes that's all it takes with neckbeards, is a nice verbal evisceration, especially if it's from, like, you know, an older woman. He was already nervous sending the text, I'm sure. He knew this was a stupid idea, but in the back of his head, he thought, what if? What if she says yes? Oh my God, this is the moment I've been waiting for. And justifiably, it blew up in his face. You love to see it. I really wish I knew what the text said, but I'm imaginative enough. I can probably come up with a few pretty solid guesses as to what was said. Oh, God. I mean, this guy is a scumbag, you know. The first story we had with him did cause me some impotent rage, but this is, like, so stupid that you have to laugh at it. What a wild thought process that would convince him to even take this chance. And so, we head on into part 2. I wish you told me earlier, Anne. I know you're reading this. I think this might be the part where we get some of that impotent rage flowing. Deep breath. Toward the end of my time with D, things were getting a little tense. This was after he'd started getting handsy, but before D-Day. Look, I like dumb puns, okay? So sue me. But it is quite apt, is it not? I'd once again come home from school to find D already at my house. Much to my annoyance, I was and am a person who needs her space, and I was a little desperate for some time to myself. D was clingy beyond belief, and it was driving me a little bit insane. So when my mom informed me that she needed to go to the store for a few things for dinner, I jumped at the chance to go with her. Mom had a heart attack a few months before, but neither N nor I liked her going off by herself to places where she might have to lift things. So it was a general rule that one of us would go with her. N had some sheet music that she needed to learn for an upcoming performance, so she decided to stay home and keep D company. Fucking make him go home, what? You don't live here. She wasn't overly fond of him. Few are. But I think she knew I was just needing the chance to be away from him for a bit. She always seemed to know how I was feeling, even before I did, so I suppose I shouldn't be that surprised. I was grateful, though. Before I get into the action, I feel like I should very gingerly disclose a little bit of N's backstory. I'm gonna tread as carefully as I can for both the sake of her privacy and for the benefit of anyone reading who might find this uncomfortable, but it is kind of necessary. N is not my blood sister. We were best friends since middle school, and close enough that anyone who didn't know us beforehand generally just thought we were twins. Mom always joked that we were on the same mental frequency. Being this close, when N's parents got in trouble for some unsavory actions, it wasn't hard to convince my mom to open our home to her. N was at risk of being put into the system, and none of us wanted that for her. We eventually wound up legally adopting her, which was a very long process. Not to be dramatic, but you probably saved this chick's life, you know? Kids that go into the system never come out well, and for your mom to step up to the plate, that's huge. Your mom's a hero, for real. N's mom eventually started to rebuild her life, so N would go and visit and stay with her for a few days at a time. When her mom married a man that she'd only known for a few months, those visits waned a bit. But N was determined to keep a relationship with her mom, and did continue to go every now and then. N's new stepdad wound up being not a great person, to say the least. At some point, he sexually assaulted my sister, and later went to prison for it. It changed N quite a bit, which is completely understandable in my opinion. She became quieter and more closed off, though she has been getting better since. God damn, dude. Fuck. Can't we execute him? Does he have to go to prison? I hope he gets executed in prison. Fellow inmates will show him what's what. At least that's what I have to believe. I didn't find out until much later on, but shortly after Mom and I left that night, N decided that she was going to make some of the Rose Earl Grey tea that she and I both loved, since it, along with some honey, helps keep overused voices from becoming too much of an issue. Dang, I need to check that out for stream time. She asked D if he wanted any, but D
Hated tea.
So she wandered into the kitchen with sheet music still in hand, leaving D to watch whatever show he was watching on the TV. She told me that she was practicing while she heated up the kettle. N projects very well when she sings, so it was easy for D to come into the kitchen behind her without her hearing him. Oh god, dude. I hate it already. D wound up very literally cornering her, and at first, he only acted as though he wanted to read her sheet music over her shoulder. D didn't give two shits about music as a whole, as N knew very well. He was always giving both of us crap for taking choir as seriously as we did, so she knew damn well that he had ulterior motives. She didn't like how close he was, nor did she like the fact that his hand was on the small of her back as he read. So she told him that she'd appreciate it if he backed up. D actually straight up ignored her request and reached over to close the sheet music before finally getting to the despicable point. She won't tell me to this day exactly what he said to her, but N told me that he basically started whining about how little I was putting out before asking her if she'd like to
Help him get revenge on me.
He wanted to screw my sister in my bed. Do you got a knife block in the kitchen? Can you just castrate this man and have it all be over with? A fucking dirtbag, dude. N froze. When retelling the story, she glossed over this, but I imagine it brought everything that she went through back up to the surface. I can't even begin to imagine how she must have felt at that moment. She didn't respond, and neither of us wants to think about what might have happened. D probably would have taken her silence as acceptance, And by now, everyone reading this probably gets where he might have gone with that. Thankfully, though, that was when my mom and I walked in through the front door. Fucking the cavalry has arrived. Our dog, Piggy, not named by us, went nuts as per usual, and her barking seemed to knock Anne out of her panic. She left the kettle whistling on the stove and ran to our room. She wouldn't talk to me for the rest of the night, and she later told me that she was actually afraid that I would be mad at her, like somehow I would blame her for my piece of shit boyfriend's actions. I want to make it clear, I would never blame her for something like this, but she was scared. I knew something was wrong, but any time that I brought it up, she just begged me to drop it. Goddamn, dude. That is heavy. I'm so glad your mom and you came home at that moment, but your sister shouldn't have been alone with this fucking freak anyways. Like I said, tell him to go home. Tell him to go fucking jump off a cliff. I hate it. Impotent rage. I only actually found out what happened on the same day that Dee sent me those gross messages on Facebook. I'd gone to her to vent about how pissed and grossed out I was about it all, but noticed that as soon as I told her, she got really quiet. Usually N was just so protective of me as I was of her, so I had actually expected to have to ask her not to go knock down his fucking door. And her reaction, or lack thereof, scared me. I knew the look on her face by now. It was the look she had when she had talked to her mom, who kept bringing up how shitty she was for telling the police about her stepdad. This time, I didn't take no for an answer. I demanded she tell me what the hell was going on, and she told me exactly what you read above. I was blown away in the worst way possible. I knew by this point that Dee was scum, but this... I immediately blamed myself, and she told me that's why she'd kept it from me, and knew that this wasn't something that I'd allow to happen, and she didn't want me to take responsibility for it. She told me that she loved me and that she was just glad it was over with. I also found out that this was part of the reason M had decided to get revenge on Dee once we'd broken up. N had confided in her, as the three of us had known each other for a long time, and she knew M could keep a secret. At first, I was a little hurt that she'd gone to her rather than me, but I get it. I'm also a lot more satisfied now, knowing that M fucked him over as hard as she could. That's the chick with the stepdad who kicked him off the porch or something like that. This is Sparta, bitch. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed both stories today. I know this was a little long, and I'm sorry for that. I've been trying to get this out for a couple of days, and short and sweet isn't exactly my MO. And I know you're reading this. I love you so much. You're so much stronger than you think you are, and you truly deserve the world. Thanks for both your permission to put your story here and the encouragement that you've given me throughout all of this. Thanks to everyone for reading. Shout out to ReddX, for giving both of my previous stories a go. I don't know if either would have been as seen as they are without you. Have a good night. Oh man, what a twofer. The first story made me laugh quite heartily. The second story definitely did bring up those feelings of impotent rage. Like, this guy's just a fucking monster. I'm so glad that you cut him out of your life. I know that you have by now, and you went through hell doing that. Like, I think I recall that he followed you around the country and all this type of shit. But I am glad that it is finally over and you can finally talk about it. And I do hope that other people that might be in a similar situation hear this story and know that they are not alone, you know? The most terrifying part of all is that this fucking guy is still out there somewhere. And I highly doubt that he has learned in any way to be better from his past experiences. He's probably just learned to camouflage himself better. And that is fucking terrifying to me. Once again, these two stories demonstrate the extreme duality of a neckbeard, you know? One, he's like, oh, I'm gonna hit on your mom, and everybody has a good laugh. And then in the second one, he's like assaulting your sister in the kitchen. I just hate to hear about it. There's two type of cringe, you know? There's the fun, laugh it off type of cringe, and then there's like the horrible, impotent rage type of cringe. And we got a good dose of both with your stories, so I thank you for bringing me up and then bringing me right back down. I'm so sorry you had to go through it. I just can't imagine what that was like for you, for your sister, for your mother. This guy was like hell bent on pulling a family apart. And I know people like this. I've met people like this. Just unrepentant sociopaths. Super terrifying. I hope that he does get his comeuppance one way or the other. There is another story out at the moment, so we probably will be hearing from Slendybeard again. I think that 2 parts funny cringe and 1 part rage cringe is like the magic ratio for an episode. And I usually do try to put the rage cringe at the end, so this worked out well. I didn't vet the stories, but it seemed to fall into place. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, I hope that you'll like, comment, and or subscribe. Maybe share it around, or, you know, share the first parts around, because you don't want to drop people in the middle of something, I guess. I do hope that you'll check out the links in the description as well. We got my wife's channel, Mr. and Mrs. ReddX. We've got my personal subreddit, r/ReddX Reads. We've got the Teespring shop if you're trying to rock the merch. Oh, and how could I almost fake forget about my patrons? My gorgeous, wonderful, beautiful, generous patrons. You're seeing their names on the screen right now, and I would like to thank all of them, but especially ZeroMMX, Lady Nix, Robert Waits, Pope Squid, Rebecca H, Cider Drinker, Tato Ferret, The Last Shinobi, Mark 211, Michael Undead, Aaron W, Mitch, John Hero, Josh K, Candy Sora, DGNZ, Fire Drake, Little Lone Wolf, Lone Island, Shara, Marvy the Moth, Ms. Monday, Silent Revolver, and JM Coon. And additionally, we did get a PayPal donation from one Miss KK. That was a couple of days ago. I had forgotten about it for just a little bit. I feel really, really bad. Beat myself up about it. So I'll probably be mentioning her at the end of episodes for at least a few more days in order to make it up to her. My brain is just made of mush, you know? I put something in there and it slides right out. But today is the day that I did not forget. So thank you, KK. Making me feel better than OKK. Making me feel great with them PayPal donations. Obviously, monetary support is really, really important, especially since we do some edgier content on the channel. Some stuff does get demonetized, like basically inevitably, despite my best efforts. So being able to lean back on Patreon, PayPal donations, that's really, really important, especially as we step into full-time YouTubery. So if you can support on the Patreon, that is absolutely massive. Thank you in advance. But if you can't, don't sweat it too hard, guys. I just appreciate you coming on through, hanging out with me, and I hope that you come on back and hang out with me again tomorrow. Because really, the views is how my beard is buttered. In order to do so, you need to keep yourself safe out there, wash your hands, super important, but also take some time out for yourself and do something that you enjoy today. Hey, maybe watching another ReddX video. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Anyways, thank you guys once again for watching. I will see you in the next one. Please always remember that you are loved, you are worthy, and you definitely, definitely deserve it. Until then, friends, bye-bye.